Hey everyone, I am Cindy Ariosa, welcoming you to the Winning the Offer, Strategies for Securing Deals and Building Trust in a Competitive Market. We have some special guests with us today. I am the Vice President of Strategic Development for Howard Hanna Real Estate Services, and I'm also Chairman of the Board of Bright, the largest MLS system. So I bring a couple points of view. Ryan Smith is from Homes. Ryan, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, pleasure. I'm Ryan Smith. I've been with Homes.com for almost 10 years now. So before CoStar, and really excited to be here, especially with the message of your listing, your lead, and what we bring to real estate agents compared to the other platforms that are out there.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Next, we have John.
Hey everybody, John Newman. I'm Area Director for the Maryland, DC region for Keller Williams Real Estate, and I've been licensed almost 20 years.
Congratulations, John. Dana?
Hi, I'm Dana Hancock, and I work the Northeast Florida market, primarily Jacksonville and surrounding areas. I am a broker. I've been selling here for 27 years, and I am also a team leader with RE/MAX.
Okay, thank you. So obviously, not every market has multiple offers. I think in the Northeast region where John and I are located, right now, 34% of every offers are multiple offers. And that's down from 42% in 2022. And then we go down to Dana's area in the Southeast, and only 6% of all offers are receiving multiple offers. So we thought it's important not only to talk about how to win with multiple strategies, but also how to win with any offer, right? And how important everything is. So Ryan, I'm going to ask you to tee up how important the portals are, where a reputation comes, where the consumer starts looking for their agent.
Absolutely. So obviously, you probably know it's more important than ever to have a strong online presence. Homes.com, we're actually number 2 highest traffic portal in the country now. So definitely important to have your free profile on Homes.com. And with your next big, buyer and seller cycles, those are kind of those millennials, and the future generations. So that age gap is, right around, say, 30 some years old and younger. And they grow up with the internet. So they're, searching everything, ChatGPT, AI, that's what they grow up with. So that's where they're starting that home search. And there's, the stat straight from NAR is that 100% of home buyers and sellers start their search online. So it's definitely more important than ever to have that online presence.
So here's an interesting factoid. I was with my daughter this weekend. She's trying to look for a house, and I sent her listing. She's like, Mom, I already know everything. I get it from the portals. You don't have to keep sending me stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm still your mother. But with that said, I do agree 100% that this next generation is starting their interviewing process, who has the properties, who the listing agents are. So I think I'm going to open this up to you first, John. What is the single most effective tactic you've used to make your client's offer stand out in a multiple offer situation?
I think, Cindy, and thank you for the question, I think it comes back to communication. Like, number one, we are in a relationship-based business, and establishing a chain of communication with the listing agent, I think, is probably the single most important thing. Aside from writing a good offer with good terms, I think it comes back to that relationship. I want to do business as a strong listing agent because all I do is listings now. I want to do business with agents that I know can get the deal to closing. And that starts with a relationship.
And where do you do your research on the agents that you're getting multiple offers from?
Pretty much everywhere, but I'll start with Bright. So how many transactions have they done? I'll look them up on Homes.com. Today, I'm looking them up on social media. So I think I can learn a lot about somebody by looking at their Instagram profile, their Facebook profile.
So it's interesting, John. You and I just spent the last couple of days in Washington D.C. at the CEO RISMedia Summit, and I think one of the underlying themes throughout the 3 days was trust and reputation. So that goes hand in hand with what communication is and what trust is. I'm actually sitting here in Shrewsbury, Pennsylvania, Central PA. There's an agent that received 4 offers over the weekend, and only 2 of the 4 agents picked up the phone to tell him they were sending an offer. Only 2 out of 4. So if you're out and nobody's calling you, how are you going to know about this multiple offer situation? And how are you doing the best for your client? Dana, I know you're in a little different bit of a market, but how important is it for the reputation and the trust for any offer that you're getting ready to submit to a listing agent?
I think it's super important. I mean, I think the number one thing agents need to work on and focus on from day one in the real estate business is growing a reputation. You know, some realtors will almost want to work against each other. I think it's super important to try and work with each other. So, and that will help you in a good market, a bad market, regardless, that will help you.
And the goal is to get your seller the price they want and the buyer the house they want, right? And the only way to do that is to work together. So with that said, how do you balance writing a competitive offer with protecting your client's interests? Right now we have gap addendums, we're waiving home inspections, we're waiving appraisals. We're renting back for free to the seller to make our competitive offer something that the seller will take. And I think, John, this goes back to you, picking up the phone and asking, what does the seller want?
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's that simple. Do you want to elaborate on it?
Well, you know, you think about it, and I think we're going to use the word trust a lot, which is important from a consumer side, it's important from an agent side, and trust starts with competency. So I need to know that I'm working with a competent agent, and my buyer, my seller needs to know that they're working with a competent agent. So how do we show competency? And then transparency, dependability, empathy. So at the end of the day, like, it's about structuring a win-win transaction. So the seller feels like they got what they want and the buyer feels like they got what they want. And that just starts with having a conversation. So coming out of like 2019, 2020, which was a crazy time in real estate, you know, I think I heard last week somebody said that like my 9-year-old daughter could have sold a house in 2020. I'm not sure if it was the same in Florida in 2020, but I imagine it actually was.
2022 was our year.
2022. So at the end of the day, like, my brother and sister bought a house, I think it was October of 2020, which was a crazy time here in the DMV. And it's about a conversation. What do you want? Here are the pros and cons. And just having a very, very transparent conversation with them. If you want to waive or put in an appraisal gap, here's the pros and cons of that. If you want to waive a home inspection, here are the pros and cons of that. And it just starts with a conversation.
So you're saying you're educating your consumer, whether it be a buyer or a seller, of every step that they are about to embark on, right? This is what's going to happen if you waive your appraisal. Do you have the extra cash in case you still want the house? This is what's going to happen if we waive the home inspection. Mr. Seller, are you willing to take on that liability for not allowing a buyer not to? So there's some good and bad, right? There's positive and negatives on both sides of the coin of when we're trying to educate not only the seller, the buyer, but we also have to educate the seller. There are unintended consequences, right? Of pre-settlement occupancy, post-settlement occupancy, all those little nuances that seem to be the flavor of the week right now. They have unintended consequences for both the buyer and the seller. Dana, are you seeing any of that in your marketplace?
Not as much. I mean, again, 2022 was our year that we did all of the things you're talking about. We still have a little bit of that here and there, but you know, one of the things, I'm kind of on the back end of that now. So our market has slowed down, our days on market has gone up. And what I'm dealing with right now is all the people who bought in 2022 with the appraisal gaps and all of the other things, you know, no inspections, whatever. And now they're selling in a market that's down and they're very frustrated because, back to John's point, some people didn't educate them that when you're buying in an up market like that, by the way, if you go to sell in a down market, you may be upside down. You may end up having to do a lot more repairs. You may, you know, it's totally different. So I'm dealing with a lot of frustrated sellers right now because they bought at the height of the height and the prices are down and everything else is down, and a lot of them are losing money. So it's you know, I've got the other side of that.
So Ryan, we started off the conversation that most of the consumers start on the portal, right? So how are the portals helping the buyers educate themselves and the sellers educate themselves? Obviously, it's a resource of data. I'll go back to Bright, since I am chairman of the board of Bright, but the MLSs feed all the data. We're lucky enough, and John, you heard our Dr. Lisa yesterday, we have an economist that helps us meander through the data. And if you don't have the data points right? You're not going to be able to educate your seller or your buyer. So how can the portals help the agents help their buyers and sellers?
Definitely. I mean, with the simple concept of we have more data pretty much than any other portal out there. But then back to us being agent friendly, having a strong online presence, having your profile updated, so that when consumers are looking for an agent, that data is there, that information, they're choosing somebody. Back to, what John was saying about trust, is having that trust, they're able to then go to, their Google pages or, their profile, read more about them, read reviews about those agents, and, feel that trust of who they're choosing and connecting with and working with. To then, connect with the seller's agents. John was mentioning how, he likes to work with agents that he knows he can do a smooth transaction with. So, consumers be able to see on our site that, this agent has worked in that area, has worked with buyers, at their price point, or worked with sellers in their neighborhood, to be able to make the decision of who they want to work with.
So it's interesting. I know a lot of agents work off referrals, right? A lot of agents work off referrals, but a lot of agents, my son-in-law included, did research, and no one in my company had sold a house in his rental neighborhood. We had a rental property, so he wouldn't use my company. He did the research to see, and where did he go to get the research? The portals. What agent sold the most homes in this neighborhood? And it wasn't one of my agents. And that's where this 30-something-year-old mindset was. I want the neighborhood expert. And he asked me if I had one, and then he researched an agent that I told him about and found out that she had only sold one house, and John Smith down the street had sold 7 of them. So I do think it's a resource for the consumer. Dana, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I have a couple comments on that. So one thing that I love about homes.com versus any of the other portals, I have a buyer coming tomorrow from New Jersey that I'm going to be with all day, and he's not super familiar with our area. And I said, if you go, I gave him zip codes, and I said, go on homes.com, because one of the cool things they do is they have that whole neighborhood thing. So videos. Where they've researched the areas, and they've got the videos on the different neighborhoods and areas. And I'm like, that will at least give you a little more information on, the different parts of town and what they have to offer and that kind of thing. And he was super excited about that. And then the other thing that I would comment, going back to an agent perspective of being on these portals, which is I've recently won 3 listings because people put in ChatGPT, who is the best agent in this area. And it comes partially from homes.com, partially from my reviews on Zillow. But interesting that all of a sudden, literally in the last 2 or 3 months, I've got 3 listings from ChatGPT. So, that is super exciting. It's super weird, but it's super exciting. But I don't think agents understand how, like you talked about earlier, the next generation, that's where they're going to pick their agent. So
yeah, it's creepy cool. I'm going to call it that, right? It's creepy cool. I sat in on an AI session at RISMedia that Brian Buffini's, and it is amazing how many agents are getting recognized through ChatGPT, because you're picking your fantasy football picks with ChatGPT. Everything's done with ChatGPT right now. And that next generation, there was more than a dozen people in that room that raised their hand that had said they have just gotten business from consumers going to ChatGPT. And I'm not an algorithm person, and maybe Ryan, you can help me with this. But the algorithms, the more you're on these portals and the more information you're putting on social media, the more hashtags, it does bring you up on the search. It's geo-targeting, not search targeting, and that there is an algorithm now that the more you are seen on social media, ChatGPT is going to recognize you, maybe above the agent that's selling more, because they're not as involved in social media and avenues like that. Ryan, you want to chime in there?
No, you're spot on. I think they call it like relevance, building relevance within Google. So, having profiles and social media and websites, as much content as you can basically online helps with, your placement onto Google, boosting your ranks and being seen more when people are searching, keywords that tie to, real estate and your business in your area, so that they can find you.
Yeah, even in little old Shrewsbury, Pennsylvania, an agent in this office had a lead from ChatGPT. And I don't know if that next generation of consumers is actually using Google anymore, or are they just asking ChatGPT for a question and then getting a follow-up question? So the awareness out in the web is really more important than ever right now. John, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I don't want to switch gears because I know this isn't a AI presentation,
Right.
but I think what you all are talking about, we just left like last week's conference, and there was basically, like, I would say probably about 70% of the content was about AI. So as an agent, like I said, okay, I'm searching for Bright, or I'm looking into what their Instagram profile to see, are they credible? Do they have, I also do use ChatGPT. Tell me about this agent. And interestingly enough, about 9 months ago, my LinkedIn profile, because I'm not a big LinkedIn user, so my LinkedIn profile said I was still a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch, because that's what I did 25 years ago. And I just never changed my LinkedIn profile. And I was like, whoa. When I asked ChatGPT, tell me about John Newman, said he was a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch. Well, guess what? That probably wouldn't go over too well with establishing credibility in the real estate space. So all these little things, homes.com, your social stature is critically important now, especially as we move to the world of generative engine GEO versus SEO. And I'm going to, whether it's Gemini or ChatGPT, that's how I'm searching for people. So we have to be aware of that.
The buyers and sellers are searching there too, right? Yep. So I think it's more important for our presence. And then once we get this client and this consumer, beyond price, it's not always about price. It's about when can you move in, when can you move out? I don't want to pay closing costs. I want to have this tax deduction. So beyond price, what terms or conditions have you found that sellers, value most in this bidding war? And I know every seller's got a different motivation, right? But there are probably 5 or 6 things I can identify that would make a difference when you're in a competitive market. Anybody want to chime in first, John?
I think it goes back to, once again, we've talked a lot about, you cannot establish trust without educating the seller on their options. So if I'm sitting with a seller, it's about, what are your goals? What are your dreams? What are we trying to achieve? Because for some people, I can't tell you early on in my career how many deals I lost, because I assumed that the most important thing to the seller was the most amount of money. Mm-hmm. And they ended up going with a cash buyer. And I'm like, why would you do that? Like, why would you leave money on the table? Because what was most important to them was convenience and certainty. So I think whether it's a buyer or a seller, it starts with educating them and slowing down sometimes. Slowing down to have a conversation about what they're looking to achieve. And then once again, it's like, okay, here's the pros and cons of scenario 1. So if you want to go with, I want the most certain, fastest closing offer. Okay, that's probably a cash offer. Well, here's a downside of that. Are you willing to take less money in exchange for that certainty? Sometimes they will say yes, but it just starts with that conversation and educating the seller.
So have you found strategically, let's say a larger EMD would work, or a larger down payment? They're going to put 30% down instead of 10% down. And then the seller seeing, they didn't put a 5% earnest money deposit down. Instead of $5,000, they gave you $25,000, just because it's going to be harder for the buyer to walk away from 25 grand than it would be to walk away from 5 grand if they get buyer remorse for some reason when they go to talk to Aunt whoever who said, you paid how much? So those are little nuggets, I think, that agents are using right now. The escalation clause, is that a viable method of saying, I want this house at all costs. I will go 10,000 above the highest offer that you get. That's how much I love your house. We can't write love letters anymore, right? NAR is frowned on that, and it's anti-discriminatory. But there are little components in strategically making your offer look better. And I think I mentioned a couple. Are you seeing that in the marketplace, John?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean,
and which one is the seller leaning towards? All?
I think it depends on the seller. It depends on, if I'm working with an investor, and I work with a lot of investor sellers. So for them, a lot of it is about certainty. They're bottom line oriented. So give me what deal has the highest probability of closing and has the best terms. So if I have, for my investor clients, if I have an offer, all things being equal, has a higher EMD, all other things being equal, yeah, he's probably going to choose that offer because it shows that the buyer has more skin in the game. But it's going to depend on every client, Cindy.
Right.
Every client's
Absolutely.
going to be different.
I've had plenty of deals where people wanted a family to move in their house. That was more important to them than the money. We want a family that's going to raise their children here, that kind of thing. So it like you going back to what John said, you got to ask. You've got to call the listing agent if you represent the buyer, and you've got to ask all the questions. You know, the other thing in just calling the listing agent is you're also going to learn what you're going to be up against potentially, right? How much do they know? Do they even understand what an escalation clause is? Do they get the concept? I mean, you know, sometimes it's an education for you as an agent. When you call the other agent, you go, oh, I know what I'm in for now, you know, so.
Dana, we've talked about communication a lot with our offers. How important is it? I've witnessed out here at this office, a lot of the buyer's agents are getting the lender to call the listing agent just for reaffirmation of, it's not a pre-approval letter, it's a commitment letter, right? They are committed. We've gotten their tax returns. I've gotten everything. I can look you in the eye, Mr. Seller, or Mr. Listing Agent, and you will know this will get to the settlement table. So we're going to go back to that trust and communication, right? Those two vehicles. So are you seeing as a listing agent, Dana, that you're getting calls from lenders to give that buyer one leg up?
Not a lot, not as much as I should be. And I'm going to put that, I'm going to flip it around because, again, our market is, I would say, a buyer's market, not a seller's market. And I represented my friend's daughter who's buying her first little townhouse, and she's only putting 3% down, and we offered a pretty low price compared to what they were asking. I still had my lender call and say, even though she's a first-time buyer, even though she's not putting a lot down, even though, you know, she doesn't have a lot of cash, the reality is she's very well qualified. So if we can get this deal together, it's going to be a done deal. I mean, she's solid, her credit's good, she has no debt. So even in a market like I'm in right now, it's still important if you're making a lower offer or you have a buyer that doesn't have a lot of money for your lender to make the call and make them feel good about what you are offering and what you do have. So either way, I think that is a key component to trying to get your offer accepted.
And I know, John, you and I have had this conversation, and I hear it here, especially because I'm in a little rural area right now today in Shrewsbury, PA, of the importance of a local lender. You know, you're in the Baltimore market. When you deal with somebody in California, they don't know what ground rent is, right? It's a fee simple house, it's a ground rent house. So how important when you get a call from a local lender from their buyer, and I know we're supposed to be objective, we're not subjective, we're looking at the facts, but our job also as your role as the trusted advisor for the seller is to make sure they're trusting you to give them some sort of advice. So how important is that local lender component as well?
Great question. And once again, obviously all offers are presented,
Right.
but if that local lender, and it comes back to the relationship side, the seller says to me, if I have a situation where I have multiple offers and the seller says, which one, in your opinion, I'm going to present both of them, which one makes you feel more comfortable? Well, here's the pros of this one. This one has a local lender that I've done business with. This one has an out-of-state lender. If the terms are all the same, well, then most likely my recommendation to the seller would be, I'm going to go with this lender because I've had a good experience with them, or I've closed a transaction with them, or I know them, or so for me, it's very, very important.
Already?
Yes. Like, once again, these are simple things, but Dana, I'm with you. Like, it might be 10, 15% of the offers that I receive. Do I actually get a phone call from the lender? It should be 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's those little nuances that don't cost you anything but time, right? A little bit of time. Can you please call Cindy, reassure her that this offer is strong? And again, I'll go back to the example, 4 offers and only 2 agents ended up calling the listing agent. They were even sending it. What if they didn't check his email last night while I was watching the football game? I don't know. Right? And he didn't even know.
The flip side is the agents that you try and call that don't answer their phone when you're trying to call and explain that you're giving an offer and about your buyer. And, you know, I get very frustrated with agents who don't answer their phone, won't call you back, and only want to communicate via text. You know, it's a little frustrating because that doesn't give you very much of that opportunity, but that's the way of some people.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, we want an easy button that we can just press, right? We want an easy button where we all communicate together. We all trust each other. It's not that hard. Ryan, do you have any thoughts about the communication of, I mean, I know you're dealing with the portal, but they're doing their research there, right? They're looking at
Absolutely.
the houses, they're looking at the comps, they're going in a little more educated than they had in the past, right? So they're
Absolutely.
coming up to John, who's going to be the listing agent, and they listened to their buyer's agent that said, oh no, you don't have to offer that much because of some of the data that they found on one of the portals.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can even speak from my own experience. I just purchased a new home last August, and of course, I did my research. I did my research on homes.com. So I did have an agent that was a referral, but I still looked them up. I didn't just, go ahead and do it just because a friend referred me and said how great he was. I went on to homes.com and did my research and made sure, he sold in my area. And that's back to that trust thing is knowing that I can trust him. But then I'm also still going to look at that data and his referrals and, recommendations and stuff like that and reviews online. So.
And know that he's a neighborhood expert, right?
Absolutely.
So we were talking about, John, you were saying with multiple offers, all things equal, we used to all do Excel spreadsheets, right? And you would write down everything. Are you seeing anybody using AI to analyze multiple offers?
Yeah, I mean, I know that I will now upload, if I have multiple offers, I'll upload them to ChatGPT. And you should do it. Everybody should do it that's listening to this just as a test case and evaluate these two offers. And you have to give it a prompt. So I want you to act as a fiduciary to my seller, evaluate these two offers. And it's really, really amazing what it will spit out, Cindy. It'll even give you like an email template to send to the seller, like, here's pros and cons. Obviously, you have to read it, because ChatGPT.
Do the disclaimer, please. Do the disclaimer.
Yeah. Do not just do not take it and just whatever it says, send it out. Please read it, because these robots can hallucinate sometimes, and it may spit out something that you don't want to send out. But yes, I think it can do what I would take me. I've been doing this for a while, so it might take me 5 minutes, 7 minutes. It can now get it done in 2 or 3 minutes.
And it's the Excel spreadsheet. If you're not proficient at Excel, right, and you got to put together a whole template, I'm hearing more and more agents are using it to analyze competitive offers. They are giving it, putting in their home inspection reports, right, to see what's more important, and they're using templates to be able to maneuver through the transaction to save them time to go outside and get more deals, right? You don't want to do the administrative stuff. You want to be like Dana, outside talking and meeting new people at Starbucks versus sitting trying to figure out an Excel spreadsheet. So are you finding that would be helpful for your seller when you end up sending him that email? Is the seller surprised that that's your summary of what the different offers are like?
Well, I mean, I've always done a summary,
Right.
For my sellers, but the AI has made my life more efficient and made it more streamlined and easier. Now, once again, just be careful. Do not
Send anything.
The AI might drop in a bunch of emojis and things like that you may not be appropriate for the seller, but I think it makes our lives a lot more, we can become much more efficient as business people.
So Dana, you had mentioned that you had a first-time home buyer. She was going in with a lower offer, and this is winning the offer. And I mentioned earlier in our discussions, it's not just about winning the offer when there are multiple offers, and we're transitioning in a lot of areas to a more balanced market. So what kind of strategies do you use to secure an offer with a buyer who's coming in saying, nah, that's not what those houses are, and then you got a seller saying, but I bought it and you just said 2022 and now they want $200,000 less. My understanding is there are 2 years and 2 months inventory of Miami condos, right? So how do you position your seller, first of all, to get an offer when there's that much inventory, when there's 2 years worth of inventory? We only have 1 month's worth of inventory here.
Well, fortunately, in my market, we only have about 4 months, so we're not as bad as the South Florida condo market, but it's still tough. Like, we have a lot of new construction here, and that's what's really making resales tough here, because the builders can afford to slash prices, buy rates down, do everything. So that's probably our toughest issue here is, regular sellers who have to compete with the builders. But anything that you can do. A lot of times I'll send comps with our offer. Here's the last 3 houses that sold that are just like yours, and here's what they sold for. And again, that have the lender call and say, I know she doesn't have a lot of money. I know she's not putting a lot down. I know whatever, but she is really solid otherwise. That's something that you can do. So and again, like in our market, a typical binder is like 1%, which is horribly low in my opinion, but it just is what it is. And I try and encourage people to put a higher binder down, because even if you're not offering a lot of money, compared to the asking price, at least if you give a higher binder, I think it makes your offer look more serious. So and if you're committed, you're committed. What difference does it make? So,
right. So how are you using the data? Because we have data on the portals, you have data in the MLS systems, and we've got most of the sellers still think that they just bought in 2022 and that's what their neighbor said they're going to get. We had a call from somebody up in Massachusetts that said, no, don't take that offer. I don't know what the people in Massachusetts know about what's going on in Towson, Maryland, but they're getting the advice from Aunt Sue. So what are you using, to help the client, whether it's your buyer or your seller, because you're probably having more difficulty with sellers than you are with buyers, but your buyers are going in, so you've got to give them the opportunity to have this winning offer. How important is the data to educate these consumers?
It's everything. It's everything, because you have to explain to them. And again, we don't have a ton of cash buyers in our area, and it's going to have to get appraised, and this is what the appraiser has to work with. So like it or not, this is what the appraiser has to work with. So here's another example. I've got a young couple looking for a vacant lot, and there's a little neighborhood that one just sold for $285, and there's a seller asking $385 for the exact same lot 3 doors down. So I texted the agent and said, so now that you know the one 3 doors down that's identical just sold for $285, do you think your seller's ready to get realistic? And he texted back and said $350 is the bottom line number. And I'm like, so what do you have to back that up? And the response was $350 is the bottom line number. Okay, then sit on your lot. I don't know what to tell you.
So John, in DC, Northern Virginia, Montgomery County, which is your hotbed, Annapolis, right? We're very strong in those markets. What are you doing to help your seller select the best offer? And more importantly, what are you doing to position the buyers? I mean, I'm hearing still crazy stuff. What's going on in Northern Virginia? How many offers? 5, 6, 7. How are you positioning your buyer when the competition's that strong? I know we said escalation clauses. We said waiving things. Is there any other nugget that you can share to make sure that your buyer's got a fair shake at getting the house when he knows he's up against 7 other people?
Well, remember, most sellers want to get a house sold. They don't want a contract. They want to get to a closing table. So what can you do if you're representing a buyer to assure the seller that you can get to closing? One of the things that I'm seeing, and once again, Northern Virginia is still relatively hot. Some other parts of the DMV area has slowed down a little bit, and we're seeing more fallout. More fallout from the contracts that are being written. So once again, they're typically falling out due to home inspection items. So if an agent calls me and says, hey, by the way, John, and once again, make sure you talk to your broker or whoever you have to talk to. This isn't legal advice, but have you educated the buyer on the home inspection process? Because the last thing I want to see is a home inspection with 27 items, or God forbid, the agent just, because I see this quite often actually, they attach the whole home inspection report and they say, here you go.
Yep.
So what I'm seeing some agents do is the buyer is requesting a home inspection, but they will not request more than X amount and more than $1,000 worth of repairs or something like that. Like, once again, give me something to go back to the seller to differentiate you from the competitors, assuring me that A, you're strong financially. Okay, that's number one. I need to know you're strong financially. 2, if you're going to do a home inspection and you're not waiving the inspection, are you going to come back to me and say that you want the bird's nest removed from the attic and you want every little thing done? Or have you spent the time? When I worked with buyers, I would go through a home inspection report. I would say, listen, I would spend the time and walk through, when I was doing my buyer consultation, I would walk through a home inspection report. And I would explain to them, this is a good home inspection report or request, and this is a bad one. And here's the difference between the two. So if an agent were to call me up and just, once again, have a conversation, here's my buyer profile, here's the lender, here's what I've done to educate them. Like, that's going to make me feel more comfortable. And I can take that information back to the seller.
So you have reassurance.
This part of this goes back to reputation, which we've talked about, but in a lot of multiple offer situations, and again, I've been around 27 years, so most of the people in town know me and whatever. I can't tell you how many times agents have said, well, if push comes to shove, I hope you get it because I've worked with you before. I know you're going to see the deal through. I'd love to work with you again. Agents sometimes don't understand the importance of keeping good relationships with other agents and doing your side of the work. And, on the note, like John was talking about, one of the things I hone in on people about, when you get a home inspection back, it has every single thing they can find on it. But in our market, what we can turn in is called a repair request, not a fix everything in the world request. So I differentiate, all right, guys, what are the true repair items? Repair item means something that's not working in the manner in which the manufacturer suggests it works. So let's go through this list and see what are the true repair items. And then when I turn the whole inspection report in, I try and point out the fact that we're only asking for the true repair items, so that the seller doesn't think that we're picking them apart and asking for everything in the world. And I often prioritize that list. Our number one most important is this, number two this, number three this, so that if they cut some things off, hopefully they've at least addressed our most important items. So
I want to go back, John, to something that you said a minute ago. I've seen recently a lot of people are saying we won't ask for any repairs under $5,000. How do you tee that up in the addendum? Is there a benchmark that you say we're not going to ask for 2,500? Is it 1,000? Is it 5,000? Is it a price point based on what the list price is? How do you tee up the buyer to say, look, we're in a competitive nature. We can ask for a couple of repairs, but the chances of them even doing a couple may not work. So let's give them a peace of mind, reassurance that if I am going to ask for something, it's going to be either really big or something that's a deal breaker, and if you don't fix it, how do you teach about that?
So Cindy, early on in my career, and this is how I started working with buyers from this point forward. Early on in my career, I remember having a couple buyer clients, and I wanted to I thought my job was to negotiate the best deal for them. And they ended up losing the house of their dreams because I was trying to negotiate with the listing agent and be cute and all these different things.
My buyer.
Yes, that's not my decision. Like, it's not my house. So today, I'm going to have a conversation with a buyer, and I'm going to say, listen, once again, here are the pros and cons of everything that you want to do. What are you willing to do such that you don't lose this house? When my brother and sister bought a house, the question I asked, we get this all the time, what should I offer? Like, I get that question all the time when I'm working with buyers. Like, what do you think I should offer? What's the amount that you're willing to offer such that if you knew that somebody else bought the house for $100 more, you'd be fine with it? Because I don't want to get the phone call saying, oh, well, I would have paid $100 more. Then put your best foot forward. And then you can sleep easy at night knowing that you put your best foot forward. So whether that's the inspection items or it's the appraisal gap, what are you willing to do to put your best foot forward to secure this deal? And do you feel comfortable with that? How bad do you want it? Yeah.
Yep.
And that is always, it's in the value is in the eye of the beholder. And I'll give you an example of this. So I've got 3 kids, and right now, as of today, my son, who is 21 years old, still has his Pottery Barn bedroom set in my garage. The value of that Pottery Barn bedroom set to my wife is pretty valuable. The value to me is Ryan, free to good home. If you can come over today and get that thing out of my garage. So it's not up to me to make a decision for somebody else. It's up to me to provide enough information and education. It's up to them to make the decision. I'm just providing all of the information so they can make the best decision possible.
And do you do that at your first face-to-face with the buyer consultation, or after you build the relationship? This is how we're going to work together.
I've always, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, so I was raised that buyer consultations, that's how you did the business. I think when the technology and stuff came out, maybe some agents got away from that. I don't know how you can establish a relationship or establish trust or anything without doing a buyer consultation. So yeah, that's done in that first face-to-face buyer consultation. And if they weren't willing to do it, then I wasn't willing to work with them. That was a non-negotiable for me.
Yeah. How about you, Dan?
I agree. I mean, I go to the home inspection with them. I'm there. We discuss it. We walk through it together. We talk about how important these things are to them. And, fortunately, again, like John, I've been doing it, almost forever. And I know what things cost, and I can kind of help keep things in perspective for them. But I'm there, and I do as much face-to-face as I can, because I think that that's super important to help guide them through and, be the voice of reason.
So John, I'm hearing a lot that listing agents are saying right up front, best and final offer. And I've also seen on the other side, I don't think buyers believe that they only get one shot at it. When the listing agent's telling you best and final offer, they mean it. That's the seller's not going to go through 4 weeks worth of looking at stuff. And just from showing my daughter and seeing the reactions from some of her friends, they're all in that. What do you mean best and final offer? That means you better do it if you want this house. So how do you convince a buyer, right? When we get told best or final offer, they mean it. We're serious, Batman. This is real. How do you convince the buyer?
I don't think, Cindy, it's much about convincing them as it is. I don't care what market you're in. The pool of buyers are all looking for similar things. I want the best house, the best price.
Best condition.
In the best condition. Yep. So that means the inventory of available properties that are the best house, the best price, in the best condition, it's always relatively finite. Like there's a lot of inventory right now, but there's a lot of overpriced inventory. There's a lot of inventory that may not be in a great location or in the best condition. So I try and explain to my buyers that you're always in a competitive market, because the best house in the best condition at the best price, everybody wants.
So interesting. My son, our older son, and his wife just had baby number 3, and they're looking for a bigger house. And they have made offers on 2 houses, both of which were on the market well over, I think one was over 90 days and one was over 60 days. And as soon as we made an offer, they got another offer. And we lost out on both because of me. And I'll be honest, it's because we have been in a declining market, and I am worried about them overpaying in a declining market. And, I'm feeling a little bad because I feel like I haven't given the best advice because they've lost 2 houses, but I am just so worried about them overpaying in a declining market, because I've got all these people right now that bought in 2022 that are trying to sell that are underwater, and I don't want that to be them. So, even in a market like ours, it's hard to give the right guidance. And, the last one, we lost it by $10,000. And I think they're pretty sad about that one. So that gets back to what's it worth to the buyer,
And that gets back to John's point of, what are you willing to do to lose this house? What's it going to take for you to lose this house? It's not what it's going to take to win this house. It's what's it's going to take to lose this house, right?
Right.
It's going to just take that $10,000, and now they know, and they're mad at mom, and I would have spent down to, it would have been $40 more.
But I would normally assert myself to the point that I did on that one, because I'm mom. Normally I just say, what's it worth to you? But in this case, I definitely inserted myself more than I normally would. So.
Yeah, so since we're all seasoned agents, do you use that technique of $10,000 more is really only $100 more a month? Are you willing to lose this? Those were back in the days in the 90s, we used to do that, right? When the interest rates were 12%. It's only $100 more a month. Are you willing to give up $25 a week not to get this house? So are we going back to some of those proven techniques to get people to offer more money, or not? Is that an unknown strategy that we're coming back to?
I think it comes back to, the competency of the agent is able to have that conversation as long as you have a competent partner in the loan officer. And it's just presenting options to the buyer once again. I'm not trying to sell them the house. I'm just trying to provide them with as much information as possible, and then let them make the best, most educated decision based upon their lifestyle and what they want. Yeah,
that's a great point. How about you, Dana?
No, I agree. What I find a little interesting, and I don't know, John, how much of this you have in your market, but I find it really frustrating when I run into agents that are making all the decisions on behalf of their seller. And I'm like, whoa, is this your house or is this their house? You know, it's your job to present information. It's not your job to make decisions on their behalf. It's certainly your job to guide them and give them the information, but I get really frustrated when I run into agents that are, I mean, they're 100% making the decision on behalf of their seller, what they are and aren't going to do, or what they are and aren't going to take, say, whatever. And I'm like, that's super frustrating to me. And I'm shocked at how much more frequently I'm seeing that.
My seller said, my buyer wants. It's not my buyer, it's the buyer, right?
Right.
So Ryan, I'm going to bring it back to you, and then I'm going to ask both Dana, John, and Ryan to give me their one flash great idea, their one final thought. But just want to bring it back to you, Ryan, a little bit with the portals and how you can partner. You're a teammate, right, to the real estate agent. You're a teammate to the consumer. You're not off in your own. You're there as a resource, right? And a collaborative effort to help both the consumer and the real estate agent.
Absolutely. And the way we're doing that is, one, with your listing, your lead, we showcase who the listing agent is, not doing lead diversion, selling leads off to, whoever's paying to be in that market, which then very well could be somebody that's not a local expert, just wants to gain business, out of that specific zip code or whatever it might be. So really showing, what agents do business in those specific areas, to pair them with the most knowledgeable agent and the best experience online. Our collaboration tools for agents, be able to invite their clients to homes.com to then be connected directly to them, so that they can set up saved searches and work straight with them, not have to worry about them getting connected, to somebody else. So that's us also doing your buyer, your business.
So you'd have to have your profile set up, guys, in order to have that collaborative. I'm going to give you a commercial and myself a commercial. You'd have to have your profile set up and able to have that collaborative sync. And there's always been the school of thought that the listing agent knows the house better than anybody, right? And that's probably why you're promoting your listing, your lead. I know that the listing agent's been in the house. They've been up and down that house probably 5 times. They're not just looking at photos. If they're a good listing agent like John, they know everything about the neighborhood. So it does make sense that the listing agent would be the source, right, of the truth, the integrity of the data, because they've been in the house 5 times already, versus somebody that maybe necessarily is, there's value. It's like I used to say, if you go to the shoe store, you want to see what the shoes look like. If you're going to look for a house, you need to go know your inventory, buyer agents. Go look at these houses so that you can be an educator on, oh my God, that's the one with the brand new kitchen. It was gorgeous. It looks better in person than it does in the photos. And then to be able to have that collaborative effort with the listing agent being able to say, oh my gosh, I've sold 4 in this neighborhood. This is the one that's been upgraded the most. It's got new windows. Did you see the flat backyard for the kids, for the 3 kids, Dana? So that the source of the information, quite honestly, the expert source is the listing agent. So
can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
One of the things that I do, I'm a heavy listing agent. I do work a few buyers, but I mostly do listings. And one of the things I commit to every single seller of mine is that I will meet the appraiser at your house. I will never let an appraiser in your house without me there. And it's super interesting how often when I talk to other agents, particularly if I represent the buyer, and I'll ask the listing agent, are you going to meet the appraiser there? And this is what I hear 99% of the time. Either no, it's not my job, or no, they don't want me there, which I find super interesting, because I just had a deal a month ago where I met the appraiser there, and he literally walked in the door and said, I hope you have comps for me, because there's no way this house is going to appraise. That's what he said to me walking in the door. So much for all these agents who say it's not my job and they don't want you there. Sure enough, went through our comps together, and he goes, I've got that one. That's not a good one. I don't like that one for whatever reason. But I had a comp in my stack he didn't have. And he said, you just saved the deal. So I am here to tell you, and I have had only one in all these years when I met the appraiser there I said, here, I've got some comps for you. And he said, I can't look at that. That's coercion or whatever the word is. And I said, whoa. I said, it's not at all. Have you been in any of these competing houses? Because I've been in every single one of them. So if I am just giving you market information, that's not me, courting or whatever the word is. I mean, it's me giving you market information. I've been in these houses. I made notes on every single one about which ones are better and which ones are worse and why. Sometimes there's a sale in the neighborhood that's super low and you call and you find out, oh, it was a divorce and they had to sell quick and the house was disgusting and it didn't look like the pictures. I mean, I'm going to bring that comp and I'm going to write all over that so that they know they don't need to use it, or they can justify to the bank why not to use it. So going back to all that, I think it's super, super important that people, meet the appraiser, know the market, back to your point, and you need to be the market professional.
It's interesting you say that, Dana. We, a couple of weeks ago, had an appraiser come educate the agents just because of this market. We wanted to see how they were dealing with the offers, the prices that are going up. He actually suggested if you have multiple offers, to eradicate the agent, the seller or buyer, the buyer's name, but do the spreadsheet to prove to them this is why the market drove the price up here. He was he's like, give me the spreadsheet that you had multiple offers.
Yep.
Give me your brochure that says all the enhancements that the property has. They have a new HVAC in 2024, the new roof was in 2023, and bring me the comps. It was so refreshing to hear that they're challenged right now too. And they know they're going to be asked more questions from the underwriter. Why are you appraising this house when the 3 comps you sent me? But to give the ammunition as the listing agent to justify what you just got for your seller, right?
Right.
So if you did that Excel sheet, or if you did your ChatGPT sheet, John, either way, the appraiser welcomes that information because they can now prove to the underwriter the competition and the marketplace is what drove this price to this price. And because of all the improvements, here's the asset sheet that they do, or the brochure, where it's listed on everything that's been done to the property. That added value to the one that you just said, the divorce, that they didn't take care of the house because everybody was moved out and was fighting all the time. So the appraisers are actually welcoming more information. They don't
very much so.
The home inspection report, though, I heard.
I've never brought that. But I had another one that was a really unique house on the water, 5-car detached garage, all the things, but a little house. And again, another appraiser that met me at the door and said, I hope you've got comps for me because there's no way I can justify this price. And although he didn't like any of the comps that I brought, the reality is he made it happen. And he said to me, he looked me in the eye when we walked out the door. He goes, well, at least you made the effort to meet me here and to try and bring me some comps. And the fact that you tried, I'm going to try. And it happened.
So funny, by doing that, you actually helped the buyer who paid for that price. And you helped the seller to get that price, right? Yeah. So it was a win-win for both parties.
Absolutely.
The buyer who ended up paying a little more than was expected, you had the information to be able to help justify it, and you helped the seller be able to meet the appraisal so that they didn't have to come down in price, right? So there's methods that we need to use to win for both the buyer and the seller.
And if you do enough of that and you meet enough of those appraisers over time, they all know me. And it's interesting how often they'll call me sometimes when they're doing a tough appraisal and say, okay, I'm doing this appraisal. Have you sold anything in this area? And what do you think? And whatever. And it's great because I can call them if I'm getting ready to list a house that's a tough one and pick their brain. And then they're picking my brain on the opposite side. So that's another branch that comes out of doing that, is you establish these relationships in that respect that really help you in your full business over time as well.
So I think, we're going to wrap it up in a minute or two, but when we define a competitive market, it's not just a marketplace where there's 5 or 6 buyers. Dana's got the exact opposite competitive market. How does she make her property shine when there's, I don't know how many months worth of inventory and there's 7 townhouses in the same community for sale? That's still a strategy that we need to have in a competitive market for both the sellers in a downward market and the sellers and the buyers in a super competitive market that's starting to normalize a little bit. So what are your final thoughts? I'll start with you, Dana.
No, I mean, I think we've gone over it. I think, everybody just should focus on their reputation. Everybody should focus on doing the best thing by their buyers, their sellers, try and create good working relationships with the other agents, because those things will take you a million miles in this business.
But how about you, John?
So I always think, Cindy, that I'm always in a competitive market, because it's always the competitive market for the best house, the best price, the best terms, with the best. It's always competitive. So just be a professional. Like, be a professional, which means that you're competent, you practice, you know your stuff, you know the market, you write clean contracts, you call the listing agent, you give me an offer summary. Like, don't handwrite the offer. I'm still seeing some agents with chicken scratch. Like, I can't believe it. Like, I can't read. Like, follow up. Hey, by the way, I just sent you an offer. Like, just be a professional.
That's a good point. And Ryan, how do you see the portals
Yeah,
helping us in this competitive market?
I mean, having a strong online presence is more important than ever. So having a free profile on homes.com, starting there, having a bio, links to your social medias, all of that's going to help, because these millennials and new generations, that's where they're starting that search, and that's where you want to be found, and that's where they're going to look at your reviews and everything else, and you're either going to get that phone call or not. And if you're not there, then you're not getting that call. So it is more important than ever to have that phone out.
So we're going to tie that in. Ryan, you just said being accessible through all the portals and having your portals updated and your profiles updated makes you, John, more professional, right? So the consumer can find you, and you can tie all these together. So your social media and your presence online is going to help you be more professional, so that people can do the research, right? And I think for Dana, we need to communicate. We need to be respectful. The education process, I love that all three of you sit down first thing, educating. This is the process, good, bad, ugly. This is what we're going to have to rely on. And you need to rely on your partners. You need to rely on your broker. You need to rely on your lender. You need to rely on your reputation in the community. And you need to be thinking a little bit outside the box. So with that, I hope everybody learned a thing or two of what to do in a competitive market, in a seller's market or in a buyer's market, right? That what you can do to enhance the ability for your client to get the deal done. If you were not able to watch this live, we will have a replay. And if we talk too fast, you'll actually be able to have a replay. So I want to take this opportunity to thank homes.com for sponsoring this event. And of course, for RISMedia for always putting such great educational seminars available to all of the agents out there to better ourselves as professionals. So thank you, everybody, for your time. Thank you, Dana, John, and Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.